It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound track. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Sound track.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I am very excited to finally get this guest on. I have had him recommended to me from a few listeners, more than a few. And when I checked out his stuff, I was like, oh yeah, we definitely got to have a conversation with this man. Today we got on RN Vooght. I don't know if I already screwed it up.
Vooght. I am Vooght.
I know, I was just thinking Groot, or whatever. I'm so sorry, I just screwed up. We got Rick on with us, and because of I think where we might end up going. I have seen him touch on some stuff that looks like touching on the body and parts of the body that kind of start to tend to look like occult symbolism or art. I did have Lisa and Teresa cover that series with me, the occult symbolism in the eyes. So I wanted to have the usual suspects on with me with this guest. Plus, I just wanted to have somebody else on anyway. But so I got Lisa and Teresa with me. Teresa, real quick before we get to the guest, would you like to let people know about your amazing podcast as well?
Yeah, so people can also check out the Spiritual Gangsters, which we also do together. And right now we're just like doing the Clown World Weekly segment quite a bit. So every week we're live Tuesday mornings on YouTube. And then it drops later on the audio platforms, but just, covering current events, giving our little spin on it, and mostly just laughing at it, because if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. That's right?
Yes. Nah. Definitely, I suggest to check out that show live every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. EST. The links are in the bottom. You already know Lisa, the mad scientist of the Occult Rejects. She's here again, as usual. You ain't got nothing to plug. Do you want to let people know? Do you want to let people know where they can find you on social media?
Sure. On Twitter, Solis Lisa, and on Instagram, Lisa Solis.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And finally, to the guest, would you like to let people know, I guess, where they can find your work, a little introduction about yourself, and where they can find your books and all that?
Sure. Well, all my books are actually self-published, so they're only available at the moment currently on Amazon. I'm in the process of building a website. Been hindered by the operations that I've been talking about, but that's the next rung on the ladder to try and put this out into the proverbial ether for everyone to find me a little bit easier. And apart from that, I'm not using Facebook. For obvious reasons, really. Twitter seems to be the place where I'm sort of gaining most gravitas, I guess, and interaction with readers and people that are throwing ideas my way as well. So it's that's kind of where to find me and where to find my books.
I even have links in the bottom now for people that are checking this out. I do think I have his Amazon link for all his books, and I think I've added his Twitter. And real quick shout out to, since I already saw that she's in the chat, is actually Helen that had first suggested you to me, and that made me look into you. And then I had other people start messaging me, and I was like, oh, I got to ask this guy. So, and here we are. So big shout out to Helen. Thank you very much for, putting this idea in my head. So yeah, I guess even though I do have the Searching for Osiris in the Tree of Life, I was told that it would probably actually make sense to maybe go back a book or so beforehand to the one prior to kind of build up to this one. So maybe we'll get to that, maybe we won't. But again, the what we're going to talk about is all relevant and is going to build up to that book anyway. So I guess wherever you would like, actually, I wanted to ask you too, what even got you like into this type of stuff? Not like putting you on the spot or anything. I'm just like, what interested you to be like, oh, I'm going to start researching and writing about this? I'm assuming it must have been passionate enough for you're very interested in it, you know?
The initial, I guess, proverbial go square that kind of set the ball rolling, believe it or not, was a book that I used to recommend back in the day, but I kind of took a step back from, and that was actually Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, probably about 25 years or so ago, at least. And it was after reading that, I stumbled across Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods, and that literally blew my mind apart, my whole worldview, really. It just made me think, wow, okay, so we're clearly missing a chapter from history, from humanity, from where we've come from. And yeah, I kind of fell into the, I guess, ancient Egyptian cosmologies of Osiris, which absolutely fascinated me. I mean, the pyramids kind of blew me away. I was becoming aware of certain hypotheses that were brought to light by Robert Temple and Robert Bouval with the Orion correlation and the Great Pyramids, which again is still highly disputed. I think there's a lot to it, and I think there's a lot more to it. And I'd like to think that I've started to build upon them particular works in particular. Again, in fairness, I wanted to write a book. I wanted to put something out there, I guess. But I didn't really quite know what. I wanted a fresh perspective, if that kind of makes sense. I didn't want to sort of raise old ground and start talking about other people's hypothesis in a new light, let's say, and not really bring anything new to the table. And it was, I basically stumbled across a documentary about close to 15 years ago now, which I'm pretty sure you're going to be familiar with, which was Rick Strassman and Joe Rogan's The Spirit Molecule.
The thing on DMT. I remember watching that a long time ago. Yeah.
100%. And I mean, in fairness, growing up I was a teenager throughout the likes of the 90s and what have you. I was extremely familiar with the underground club and, I guess, air quotes, drug scene. Yeah. I tried mushrooms, all sorts. And I guess I kind of thought I was not world wise to it, but I thought I had a decent sort of background in understanding what these particular psychedelic or conscious altering chemical compounds were all about. But DMT, for some reason or another, even throughout that whole wild partying scene that I was kind of entertaining throughout the 90s, DMT was never on my radar. I'd never heard of it. It was the whole thing was completely new to me. And it was when I watched this documentary, I don't even know how to explain it. It literally completely shattered my worldview with regards to what the potential was for human consciousness, and what it could mean for the future of humanity. And I wondered DMT had only been sort of, I guess, synthesized since around the 1950s. And I then became obviously aware of the shamanic tool, ayahuasca, which had obviously been around for anything of upwards of thousands of years prior, you know. And I'm thinking, if all these cosmologies are associated alongside something that's extracted from their proverbial tree of life, that there might be something fundamental to the understanding of human consciousness and possibly beyond, and that there might have been, again, another proverbial lost chapter in human history where someone somewhere might have actually worked out the nuts and bolts of what this conscious shifting chemical compound might have for the benefit of future generations of humanity, you know. But again, I was very, very, very naive to what this molecule was all about. But I felt quite strangely drawn to it, as if even though it was fresh to me, and the 2D rendering of this particular molecule was completely new to my senses, there was something just sort of itching at the back of my mind saying, dude, you've seen this somewhere. You know this is familiar to you. And in all honesty, I was racking my mind, and it was driving me crazy. So I've literally left my apartment after watching the Spirit Molecule, and I've gone down to sit on the beach, and I'm thinking, what is it? Where have I seen this before? Where have I seen this before? It's driving me crazy. And literally, I mean, it was like an epiphany. It was like something out of a movie. It was crazy. I mean, the clouds literally parted in front of me. It was a cold, dark night on the beach. The clouds moved away, and Orion's literally shouting at me. It's like, yoo-hoo, dude. And as soon as I had that realization of what could potentially be a two-dimensional rendition of this molecule in the sky, the myth of Osiris hit me like a freight train. And it was literally a wow moment, you know? Which is where I guess...
I don't want to I hate to interrupt you, but you said something, and I think it's kind of like, I think you're getting at stuff that I've even said with occult symbolism. Sometimes I think you're just looking at like something that's supposed to be described in 3D in a sense, but you're looking at it in like real like 2-dimension. I mean, I know there's no difference, but it's like you're looking at something that's like meant to show a 3D design, but in it like you're looking at it just flat, and that it actually doesn't have any depth. And I think you're kind of getting at like that really with what you were saying here. In a sense.
Oh, it really, yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to categorize it. It literally knocked my socks off. I was thinking, it can't be. And
you know what's weird? That started happening to me after I had magical experiences, or however you want to, call them. Is that I started to look at just images like completely different. Like I was just like, oh, like why does that have to be like not 3D rendering? Just because it's old, it doesn't mean people weren't trying to draw like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I just started looking at images completely differently. It was like, oh my God, if you were just to like think of that as a 3D image, it makes sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. But in essence, when I was writing The Spirit in the Sky, it came to me literally. I mean, there's the trail of synchronicities or coincidences is kind of uncanny. I mean, I like to say, how many coincidences do you need until you have an affirmation or a complete correlation?
Do you ever think that stuff happens on purpose because you're like going in the right area or doing like...
For sure.
Because like a lot happens a lot with podcasting, with certain topics that I'll cover sometimes with like certain guests. It's just like you almost kind of like start tumbling into more stuff. It's hard to explain.
Without a doubt. I mean, when I first published this, I thought it was going to kind of be a bit of a mic drop, and I was going to leave it at that and kind of walk away and maybe sort of venture into some more writing, whether it's going to be with regards to ancient cosmologies, Egyptology, chemical compounds, who knows? the universe was just kept calling me back, you know. Every time I kind of wanted to sort of pigeonhole this theory and walk away, something else would just literally slap me in the face and go, dude, there's more to this. There's more to this. This is part 2. That's part 1. That's a stepping stone. You've got more to write. You've got more to write. And as I say, the synchronicities were not, I don't know, they were quite powerful, to be fair. On the night that I was ready to go live and actually publish The Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods, and Marina World We Find Them, I actually found myself talking to the constellation of Orion through my window. And it's, I'm going to box this as quickly as I can and move on, but I never wanted to, I was kind of, always have been kind of a free spirit, and my brother has got a couple of kids. I mean, they're in their 20s now. They're great kids. All my cousins have had kids. All my friends have had kids. I never wanted children. It was something that wasn't, I don't know. I wasn't really ready. I didn't know if I ever was going to be ready, but I felt the world wasn't welcoming enough for me to bring another part of me into, unless maybe I had some sliver of hope of making it a better place one way or another, if that makes any sense. Now, I was speaking again rather randomly to the constellation, saying, look, we're going live tonight. I'm going to do my best to talk to the world about you. But if this goes as well as I think it needs to go, and it should go, if it gets a bit of gravitas behind it, I think it could make the world a better place. And if the world is a better place, then damn, let's do this, man. Let's maybe try for a child with what was now my ex-partner. And I left it at that. It was cool. It was like a Pinocchio moment, you know, wishing upon a star, if you know what I mean. Which, again, I boxed and left. The book went live that evening, and my girlfriend came home from work that evening as well and said, obviously, I've been on Amazon. I've seen it's gone live. Congratulations. I think you might want to sit down for what I'm going to tell you next. I said, okay, I don't think anything's going to knock my socks off right now. She said, well, take a deep breath, because how do you feel about being a dad? And she told me she was pregnant. The hairs on the back of my neck and my arms just went a little bit crazy. I obviously told her about the conversation that I just had with.
I think I would have been more surprised about the timing than the situation.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I'd been like,
Crazy.
Like, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, as an author, you can't write that shit, you know? But even more astounding than that was almost like some kind of cosmic affirmation. The book was going great guns. I was appearing on a number of podcasts. As I say, Mr. Hancock picked it up, retweeted. I was featured author of the month on the website. Everything was going absolutely fantastic. I got called away to have a checkup on my spinal fusion in London. And while I was in London, I received a phone call. And this is basically not far from being 9 months after going live with Spirit in the Sky. And the phone call was, I'm going into labor. So I have to now race back from London so I don't miss the birth of my child. I literally made it by the skin of my teeth, like literally by the skin of my teeth. I've put all the scrubs on, popped in. He's popped out. Welcome to the world. Everything's amazing. I was totally ecstatic, completely euphoric. I was in such a shocked state of mind that I'd now become a father for the first time, thinking back to obviously me speaking to Orion and all the crazy stuff that came along with that. And I didn't feel like I could drive home, so I've ordered a taxi. The taxi turned up. I've said to my partner, I'm going to pop home, get a few bits. I'll be back within sort of the hour, and then we'll go from there. But I'm sitting in the back of the taxi, and usual taxi conversations go, how you doing? You live in the area? When did you get off? X, Y, Z, this, that, and the other. But my mind was racing. My mind was absolutely racing. And I just needed to chill it out a little bit. And I asked the cab driver if he mind putting the radio on. He said, yeah, not a problem. Is there any particular station? I said, no, whatever pops up first. I'm happy. He puts the radio on, and the DJ introduces the first song. And it was The Spirit in the Sky by Noonbar. And I was like, what the fuck is going, excuse my language, I'm sorry, but
oh no, you're fine here.
I mean, even thinking about it now, it's just, it was so surreal. It was like, man, of all the songs, of all the cabs, of all the radio stations, all the timing, do you know what I mean? And it was another one of them kind of cosmic affirmations that went, dude, you're on the right path. Don't stop this. Don't stop this.
One I was going to insert on the enzyme that is needed for DMT is very high in placentas, since you're bringing up the birth of your child.
Wow. See, every day is an education, and I thank you for that. I'll be taking notes as well as you guys. So, and again, DMT, I mean, other than it being probably one of the world's most highly illicit, psychedelic, world-shattering chemical compounds, no one knows what it is other than kind of what it says on the tin. Like, you take this, you're going to see some shit you didn't think was feasible, you know, and you're going to come back and you're not going to be linguistic enough to actually put across what you've seen or what you've witnessed, although you will know, or at least feel, that you're part of a greater something, a greater whole. When people say, like, we are made of stardust, you know, I felt like that proverbial stardust, you know. And in essence, I mean, I actually wrote The Spirit in the Sky, kind of talking the talk without walking the walk, you know. I hadn't actually had the experience. I hadn't had a breakthrough DMC experience, threshold experience or anything. It just wasn't on my radar. And people do say, like, I'm pretty sure you're aware of, like, DMT kind of finds you when you're ready, not the other way around. And yeah, I guess 6 months after publishing The Spirit in the Sky, excuse me, I was introduced to DMT for the first time. And in fairness, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I had it in front of me for almost 6 months, the best part of half a year, before I even raised the courage to actually try it. After hearing so many stories with regards to, I guess, how fragile the mind is. And, excuse me, yeah, about the immaterial other realm that this absurd chemical compound seems to take you to, that becomes mesmerizingly overloading with regards to the senses, but is also at the same time unbelievably familiar. It's like a welcome home, you know, like you come home from a hard day's work on your birthday. No one spoke about your birthday for a week, but you walk through the door, and all of a sudden it's a surprise party. He's here. That's kind of what it felt like, you know. And it has done I'm not overly versed with regards to being a mad, I don't know, psychonaut that's taking it every other whenever we can, if you know what I mean. I think to a certain extent, what I've seen enough for me to know, I guess, the affidavits and the what people are talking about are right. You know, they're all speaking from the same proverbial hymn sheet, if you know what I mean. There's definitely something more to the human experience with regards to our current ocular capacity within the three-dimensional realm as we are talking now. I do genuinely believe that introducing more extraneous DMT past the blood-brain barrier opens up a particular veil that is otherwise incomprehensible, inconceivable, and if not invisible to us, but is, I guess, alive with these spiritual entities that are right in front of us. And I think the ancient cosmologies have been talking about this the world over for thousands and thousands of years. And it's, I believe, the structure of some of this otherworldly realm or dimension has been stitched into myth and mortar for the benefit of people like ourselves to kind of pick at the stitch and then read between the lines, if you know what I mean, as opposed to just taking certain myths at face value, which is where we get into the myth of Osiris. Because if you take the myth of Osiris at face value, it makes no sense whatsoever. Like, no sense whatsoever. In a nutshell, I can walk you guys and the listeners through it for a better understanding of how I got to, I guess, this entire hypothesis.
Yes, please.
Well, so the myth of Osiris basically starts whereby Osiris, his wife, and fellow guests have all been invited to, for want of a better description, like a grandiose banquet where they're going to have a wild celebration, and everyone's having fun. The guy that's actually organized this particular celebration or party is a guy called Seth, and Seth is recognized as Osiris's wicked brother or dark brother or chaotic other. And what Seth decides to do, he's actually brought an ornate coffin or a coffer carved out of wood, and he places it in front of everyone that's at this banquet. And he actually he says to them, "I'd like everybody to lie down inside this beautiful coffer, and whoever it befits comfortably can in fact keep it." So guest after guest, they all lay down inside this wonderful coffer, and they're either too short, too tall, too wide, too thin. It doesn't fit any. It's all kind of ill-fitting until the turn of Osiris. Osiris duly lays down inside this coffer, and to the guests' stunned amazement, Seth and his men fasten Osiris inside with a lid. They pick up the coffer, they swiftly take it down to the Nile and toss this beautiful coffer with Osiris entombed inside it into the Nile. Now, this coffer floats for days, weeks, nobody knows, but it eventually runs aground on the coastal banks of Byblos on the Nile. And an acacia tree, it says in the mythology, grows up around this coffin and entombs the coffin inside the trunk of the acacia. And it appears to the king of Byblos as the most wonderful tree that he's ever seen. And what he wants to do, he orders the felling of the tree. So he wants to cut it down, carve it into an ornate pillar, which is then going to hang it on the walls of his palace, which he does with Osiris inside. Now, his wife, Isis, has been searching and searching and searching. She comes across Osiris entombed inside this pillar. Again, on the outside looking in, this makes no sense whatsoever. This stuff doesn't happen in the real world, so we have to read between the lines. But what she does, she bargains with the king of Byblos to set Osiris free, which she does. But this enrages Seth. Seth finds out and then murders Osiris for a second time, dismembers him, puts his limbs all over ancient Egypt, scatters him across the land, whereby his spirit is said to have been raised and become synonymous with the constellation of Orion. But because he was encased within the pillar of a tamarisk tree, which is an acacia variety, which is still found on the banks of the Nile today, excuse me, he was known as the lifeblood of the acacia. So we can either run away with that, which the Egyptologists point blank are readily happy to accept. They're saying this is how it happened. Osiris was popped into a box, a tree grew around it, it was cut down, his wife rescued him, his brother murdered him again, he became a constellation, and he was remembered as the lifeblood of the acacia. Full stop. We're not gonna talk about this any further. Move along. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Makes no sense whatsoever, unless we decide to dissect it and look at it through a far more scientific lens. Now, if we look at the makeup, or indeed the lifeblood or the sap of the acacia, that's where we find extremely high levels of extractable LN-DMT, our spirit molecule, our spirit in the sky. Now, when we look at a two-dimensional rendition of DMT, we put that side by side with the constellation of Orion. Yeah, let me flick through some of these. What becomes glaringly apparent, we're nearly there. Here we go. What becomes glaringly apparent is that there's a lot of commonalities between both the chemical compound found within the lifeblood of the acacia, or indeed Osiris, and Osiris in the sky, represented as a two-dimensional rendition of the constellation of Orion, which, yeah, I believe for all intents and purposes, there's been like, I guess the mythology has got breadcrumbs, if you know what I mean. If you're willing to pick up the breadcrumbs and follow the mythology, you can actually find something a lot more tangible in the real world regarding the mythology and this entheogenic chemical compound that we find permeated throughout nature within the human body, that's created in the human brain. Again, nobody knows why. Now, what I did have when I initially released The Spirit in the Sky, and for completely understandable reasons, I had people approach me saying that, with all due respect, we understand where you're coming from, the mythology makes sense, but the constellation of Orion, it's damn close, but it's not a carbon copy, let's say. The bottom half of, let's say, the trapezium of Orion doesn't appear to mimic the hexagonal makeup of the molecular structure of the benzene ring, which is part of the chemical makeup of DMT, which they were warranted to do. And I had a lot of people kind of screaming pareidolia, you know, its faces in clouds. It's close, but is it close enough? And in my mind's eye, it was somewhat, yeah, it appeared good enough. The mythology made a world more sense, as opposed to what was being punted by the Egyptologists. But I couldn't help but think they're right. This isn't a carbon copy, but it's damn close. So this is where we get a little bit more exciting with regards to the possibilities of what this mythology says after Osiris was assimilated from the earthly domain and emblazoned across the cosmos. Because what we find, I'm going to try and open this up a little bit. Has that messed around your screen too much, or is that okay?
That looks great.
Can you see my cursor here on the screen?
No, that I can't now.
No. Okay. I'll try and do it just visually. So
one thing I did want to say real quick on this symbol, the way you have it highlighted, it very much reminds me of like the peace sign, or like a rabbit, actually. Or like rabbit ears.
Oh, absolutely. You say the rabbit, yeah?
Yeah, or like even like when you see politicians doing the peace sign behind each other's head.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of like your fingers in your hand. And, I don't know.
Absolutely. And again, for all intents and purposes, what does DMT do to you, apart from give you a whole world view which is peaceful, right? You know, it's kind of like Graham Hancock says, if every politician was, before they took office, had to have either a breakthrough DMT experience or upwards of 10 ayahuasca experiences, I tell you what, the world would be in a better state. And I tend to agree. 100%, you know, 100%. I know it's not for megalomaniacs, but then again, if they see past, I guess, the proverbial veil of three-dimensional reality and see that there might be something more to this particular experience than meets the eye, then yeah, why fight each other? Why not work towards, I guess, a brighter future, you know? But I find it ironic, talking about synchronicities again, that you've mentioned like the rabbit's ears and the peace sign, right? It's the rabbit that comes into contention here with the constellation below Orion, which actually would appear, for all intents and purposes, once again, to complete the hexagonal benzene ring of the DMT molecule. Because what we find is that in ancient Egypt, the myth of Osiris continues what's known as a celebration of Abydos. And in Abydos, it's still celebrated today, where Osiris is said to, he's meant to take sail of what's known as the cosmic barge, which they call the Neshmet, okay? And when he sets foot upon the Neshmet, he crosses the Nile. And everyone's having wild celebration. The Egyptologists today say, yeah, it's because of the changing tides of the Nile and everything becomes green, and hence his skin's green. That would make sense with regards to rejuvenation and I guess feeding the masses throughout the Nile Valley on the Nile Delta.
I always found that interesting, though, how you do see some of these gods depicted with like greenish skin. You know, I've seen that done with some of them. I mean, we'll get to this in a minute as well, because I've got slides that represent this, but it's my contention as well that his skin is green for an extremely important reason regarding the ocular capacity of the human eyes as well, which we're going to get to. But what happens with Osiris setting foot, again, just to backtrack, he sets foot aboard what's known as the Neshmet, the cosmic barge, and he crosses the Nile. But what Osiris also does, he has a number of namesakes, okay? And he's also synonymous with a rabbit-headed deity called, also known as Unefa. And excuse me, they have their own constellation which depicts this rabbit-headed deity, okay? So on the left there, you can see Osiris, his incarnation as a mummified, a mummified deity with the head of a rabbit, okay? What does this mean? Why would they do that? And on the right, we have Osiris assimilated to another, I guess, character within the pantheon of ancient Egyptian gods known as Sahu, and where he's actually set foot aboard the Neshmet, okay? So if we skip onto this next view here, what we're doing, the constellation below Orion, known today to astronomers as Lepus, and we recognize that. I mean, Lepus is ancient Greek for rabbit. That's all it means, rabbit, yeah, or the hare. So if we use the stars, and only the stars of this particular constellation's head, like the rabbit's head, yeah, what we actually find is that the myth makes a lot more sense. So if you've got the constellation of Orion originally without the constellation of the rabbit's head Lepus or Wenet or Unefa below it, excuse me, for Osiris to set foot on the Neshmet, the second brightest star in the constellation of Lepus or the rabbit's head, it was actually recognized in Egypt as the Neshmet, the cosmic barge. Okay, so if we take one standing foot of Osiris and bring it down to the Neshmet, so he's standing aboard the Neshmet, and the brightest star within that constellation, which makes up the rest of the rabbit's head, which is known today as Alpha Leporis, and we connect those proverbial dots in the sky, we actually make the hexagonal benzene ring for the carbon copy of DMT in the sky. I can't see
any other reason for them incorporating just the rabbit's head along with the entire constellation of Orion for any other reason apart from trying to depict a full-on two-dimensional rendition of the chemical compound DMT. But even more astounding is that we find in order for DMT to work or have a breakthrough experience, excuse me, it has to bind to the serotonin receptor, okay? So what we find is there's a star known in the rest of the rabbit's head as Beta Leporis. And Beta Leporis has a number of ancient connotations that come along with it, okay? And them connotations are known to be joyfulness and well-being. And if we look at the constellation, excuse me, come right here. If we actually decide to stick with Osiris being assimilated aboard the Neshmet to complete the benzene ring, yeah, the next brightest star within the rabbit's head is actually called Nile. So he's voyaging across the Nile, so it makes sense to join the dots. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when we join the dots, it creates the star that makes this possible to create serotonin is named after that particular neurotransmitter's function within the endocrine system of the human brain. Mm-hmm. So we have serotonin in the sky. Does that make sense?
That's bugged out.
It's crazy. I mean, again, you can't make it up. You can't write it. You know, it's like I'm not finding stars and dots to join up to fit my hypothesis, if you know what I mean. I'm following the mythology as they are basically, yeah, I can see on the screen, follow the white rabbit. It's beautiful. And it's so true. If you follow the rabbit and you follow, there's no two ways about it. What we see side by side is Osiris in the sky, albeit DMT, now assimilated aboard the Neshmet and crossing the proverbial Nile. We create the chemical counterpart, which it's actually describing, what it's actually describing. And the stars are named, as I say, after that particular neurotransmitter's because serotonin's job in the human brain is to keep us largely happy, to have a sense of well-being, to be joyous. Bear with me. But again, it doesn't even stop there. It gets a little more crazy because Osiris is his wife or sister. I know what's going on in ancient Egypt, but that's how they done things. But if we decide to marry Osiris in the sky with Isis in the sky, something else happens, which is kind of crazy because not all, but most ancient Egyptian deities are remembered as one star in the sky, just one star. Osiris has an entire plethora of stars and an entire constellation plus the head of another constellation, whereby he's remembered, excuse me, going back to the other image with the when he's assimilated as Sahu. I'll get to Sahu in a second because I mean this still blows my mind when I'm actually thinking about it. But Isis herself is recognized as the brightest star in the night sky, which is Sirius. So what happens if we marry Osiris with his wife in the sky, Isis? And Isis is known for her healings, for an unspeakable amount of magical incantations. What does that mean? Oh, and fertility. She's a fertility goddess. What can that mean if we marry them side by side? Well, what happens is we then create psilocybin in the sky. Magic mushrooms, as I'm sure you well know, are known for magical incantations. excuse me, for healings. But the mythology behind Sirius itself, Sirius in bygone days, thousands of years ago, was mixed up with Venus, the morning star, because of its brightness, and was thus named and confused by a number of famous philosophers as well for being one and the same, which they weren't. Excuse me. But Sirius and Venus, Sirius was actually named phosphorus because of its extraordinary luminescence. And if we add phosphorus to the chemical makeup of DMT, we create psilocybin. So we have psilocybin in the sky alongside serotonin and DMT, just as the mythology is asking us to follow. And again, we can run away with ideas that Osiris was locked in, rescued from a tree, was chopped up, became murdered, and became a constellation in the night sky. Or we can read between the lines, which is what I like to believe we're doing here, follow the mythology in the sky, and literally plot out a chemical compound that's hardwired to the human brain and our consciousness, that whereby when it's ingested or passes the blood-brain barrier, a whole new world of opportunities and ideas open up in front of us. And again, there's people that refute this and run away from it. I mean, I'm not going to force throw it down anyone's throat, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's logical. I think it's illogical to say that someone's rescued from a tree and becomes a constellation. It makes no sense whatsoever. But even more astounding than this is when Osiris actually gets assimilated to this other deity known as Sahu. Something crazy kind of happens, because what we find is that Sahu is actually known as the father of the gods. He's also known as the hidden one. Now, DMT is, for all intents and purposes, hidden throughout nature. Yeah, it's hidden throughout the animal kingdom. It's hidden in the acacia. It's hidden in our brains. But it's also known as the incorruptible soul, which psychonauts and DMT, I guess, journeyers would be kind of, I guess they'd understand a meaning with regards to an incorruptible soul. I mean, don't get me wrong, prior to this particular chain of research, I was under the impression, I had the sternest belief that when we die, we die. It's fade to black, that's it. Enjoy the ride, there's nothing more, you know? After experiencing DMT, I couldn't have been any further from the flip side of that coin than the mindset that I had originally. I now believe that we do have an incorruptible soul that might just permeate the entire universe, you know, but we're only privy to that under the influence of DMT, which is, again, like I say, when we have that, I guess, welcome home party that you weren't expecting, you know, when you walk in, like, whoa, okay, I weren't expecting this, but it's oddly familiar to me because I kind of recognize you guys, you know, but I don't know how. And these entities are saying, man, he's done it again. He's here. He's come back. Can you see it? Do you get it now? Do you get it? Excuse me. And I believe that part of the incorruptible soul and that experience has been built into this particular mythology or indeed methodology. But Sahu also goes, and this is what blew my mind completely, he goes by another namesake. He's known as the beautiful renewal. And Egyptologists will say, again, it's the renewal of the Nile Valley, the Nile Delta, where everything that was dying becomes green and lush again, which, yeah, makes a lot of sense. But I don't think you need a mythology or a number of mythologies to hold your hand to tell you that that's what goes on with the cycle of time throughout the birth and death of crops and the life cycle of, I guess, nature through 12 months. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I think even most kids can see that. I don't think they need their handheld with a mythology to actually tell you that. I think there's something else going on here. Now, the reason I think that this beautiful renewal is so rewarding, should we look at it through a scientific lens, is that what we find now with DMT in recent studies is that DMT promotes neurogenesis, the regrowth and renewal and rebirth of dead or dying brain cells. So the hidden one, the beautiful renewal, the incorruptible soul, aboard the Neshmet, traveling across the Nile with his wife, Isis. You have serotonin, we've got psilocybin, we've got DMT in the sky. The mythology and the methodology appear to match. The 2D renditions of these particular constellations and chemical compounds appear to match. Should we accept possibly a different methodology than what's being punted out by, I guess, so-called experts that are clearly gatekeepers of a mythology that maybe I don't know if it's a conspiracy. I just don't think that they've taken the time to look at a lot of these mythologies and apply 21st century science and logic, if that makes sense, and actually read between the lines to see what may or may not be going on here. I mean, again, I could be completely wrong. But I think there's far too much weight behind what this particular mythology is saying, where it wants us to look, what dots in the sky it wants us to join. It's almost like painting by numbers, you know? And when we do that, I think it's worldview shattering with regards to who our ancestors were, what they were capable of, what they were privy to regarding the evolution of the species and consciousness itself, you know? Again, I don't think it's a case of, we die, fade to black, game over. I think that somewhere along the line, somebody somewhere worked this out and basically built the mythology around it for, I guess, 21st century, call it psychonauts, call it scientists, call it what you want. People that are just curious to follow the mythology and find something that's wholly gratifying and usable, let's say, for everyone, like literally everyone. I think that maybe back in the day, pharaohs and the hierarchy were privy to this. Maybe not everyone was. Who knows? I don't know. That's neither here nor there. But what we're looking at and what we understand about DMT today, I think someone somewhere back in a bygone day, whether it's pre-Diluvian or antediluvian ice age flood, I don't know, and I don't really care. But someone somewhere had worked this out for us to, I guess, again, read between them proverbial lines, you know? And what do you guys think?
I definitely think stuff like this can probably come due to having like magical experiences. And like what you were saying, like, you know, you said before, you know, not to be like, you know, is it a conspiracy or whatever, but I mean, like you were saying, I guess like we'll never know. But in my opinion, I do think at some point this stuff wasn't so, I wouldn't say secretive, but it wasn't so unknown.
Sure.
You know, I do think humanity was more hip to this way of thinking and looking and viewing the world. And there was something just happened to where, I don't know if it was out of convenience or sympathy or something, but like shit just went wrong, and I just feel like this stuff.
Yeah,
is like,
100%. 100%. I mean, the pantheon of deities are known as the Netters, and Netta itself just translates as nature. You know, they knew what nature was about, and I believe that they knew what the nature of the human experience and possibly beyond was, or could potentially be about. You know, and again, I think that they've built this into a very, very straightforward mythology, if you think about it.
Well, that's like a lot of things that I've even been saying for a while now, but on like a lot of certain like topics, especially, you know, inside the eyeballs and other things. I don't think things are meant to be looked at the way that they
without
are.
a doubt. I mean, you posted
There's
something on
much
Twitter the other
deeper
day. I
stuff in
think
it.
it was called the Birth of Venus painting, if I recall, where you have Venus that's born of the Titan standing on that
Oh,
like,
yes.
8 foot
seashell.
wide clamshell. You know, it's like, okay, scallops ain't that big. What's going on there? What are they trying to depict? And I mean, a tip of the hat to yourself. You know, you put that right next to a cross section of a human eye, and it's like, whoa, okay, what's going on there?
Yeah,
Just
I think
the-
you even like retweeted that. I remember that one. I was like, oh, that caught his
Oh,
attention.
100%. 100%. I was like, dude gets it. He's seeing this now, you know? And the thing is, once you kind of look at these ancient Renaissance artwork, you know, I think it was, what's his name? Paluzzi back in 1990 or 1991 that looked at the creation of Adam. And he was like, damn, that ain't no God in clouds with chairs. That is a cross section of a human brain. You know, you've got the cerebellum, you've got the spinal cord. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. And again, faces in clouds or not. I mean, I've never seen gods in robes looking out of clouds and that. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But essentially, the human experience.
I've literally. Oh, I think. Oh yeah, you glitched for a second. Sorry, I didn't. It was gonna interrupt you anyway. Sorry, but I've literally seen recently. You know, I've been like kind of getting into like doctors or people that are in like some sort of like, you know, field, you know, that have like credentials that are kind of like, in my opinion, I think they're kind of like talking about occultism, but bringing it back to like the psyche and the brain and the eyes. And there was even one of them that even one of their lectures pulled up that same painting that you're talking about. It was even showing how like blatant that is to like inside your head.
It doesn't stand alone either.
Yeah.
You know, there's another one that's known as I think it's called the Transfiguration of the Light. I don't have it on my laptop currently, but I mean, if you put this particular painting alongside an MRI scan of the human brain, all of a sudden Jesus standing there, because the brainstem, the two swirling clouds are clearly the hippocampus. You know, it's I mean, I could be wrong, but I've never seen anyone transfigurated into light with swirling clouds, and do you know what I mean? Again, it's everything's. I say that a lot in my books. Everything is allegorical. I mean, the Bible. When we talk, I mean, I'm not here to offend people. I mean, you might be religious, you might not, you might. I don't know, but it's the times in the Bible where it says everything Jesus said was in a parable. You know, everything Jesus said was a dark saying. You know, you have to read between the lines. What is a parable? What is a dark saying? And yeah, it's. You have to read between the lines. You don't take it at face value. It means something deeper. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the likes of Bill Donahue, who talks of the Bible basically as a blueprint for the human brain, for the biology of the human brain mechanics and beyond. I mean, when I was introduced to that guy's work, all of a sudden, yeah, I mean, mine made sense just like that. But with regard, I mean, I used to look at the Bible, no disrespect to anyone out there, but it's almost like brainwashing material for people that can't think themselves if you're going to take it literal, you know?
I hear what you're saying.
But there's an angle and stories and ways to look at some of these parables that actually talk about a blueprint of the human brain, you know, and how it works. And I think that that's far more important than my God's better than your God. I'm this, you're that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all the same, and we've all got the same stuff. What can be more important about working out how this actually works? And again, for all intents and purposes, I don't think we use the human brain to its optimum capacity, you know. But I think that somewhere in history might have worked that out and then built stories, you know. What are you going to remember with regards to again, going back to the spirit in the sky hypothesis? If we're going to build something that's test the pass the time test and last thousands of years, what are you going to remember? Is it going to be like a hero's journey, whereby these trials and tribulations are all allegorical regarding brain mechanics? Or are you going to talk about literally the fundamental nuts and bolts of the grey matter, the hippocampus, the ventricle? It's all very forgettable. It's all very, very, very forgettable. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not that inspiring, if you know what I mean, if you don't know how to look at it. But if you look at it through, again, the hero's journey, a lot of these mythologies relate to what we've got up here. I mean, these are our temples, you know, and it even says in the Bible as well, like the house of God, the temple is built without hands, without bricks. I mean, it's all going on up here, you know. I mean, with regards to the hippocampus that we touched on, I don't think, in fact, the images here, bear with me. Okay, here we go then. So
I'm really glad you brought up Amun's horn, because there's something that Lisa could add to that. I think that's actually really fucking impressive. So,
well, Jesus is synonymous with Amen. He's known as the Amen. Amen is synonymous with Amun, Amun's horn, Amun Ra, Zeus Amun, Jupiter Amun. What is going on? They're all sporting horns. They're all ram-headed deities and such. Jesus was the Lamb of God, you know. So there's connotations with horns there, but what does that mean? You look at the Amun's within the human brain. That's the hippocampus. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, what else can that mean? You know, what else can that mean? Excuse me. But what does hippocampus, for argument's sake? Hippocampus means seahorse, and again, with good reason.
Yo, I was going to say this before, and I'll just say it now because this is, I think, perfect timing too. When we were talking about art in the brain, I did want to mention, I think, like, you can take that beautiful painting that you were referring to before, and then I think you can go right to Geiger's alien art, and I think he's showing you the same stuff inside your brains, but they both look totally different. One looks scary, nasty, possibly perverted, and one looks, church-like. But they're showing you, I think, the same shit.
100%. I mean, I don't have the imagery here, but you're familiar with a rendition of, yeah?
Say that again?
No, Baphomet.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think he's in your head. I think he's in your brain. Sure.
But, again, that's some kind of, whoa, scary. I mean, Baphomet, yeah. Devil, evil, what have you, this, that, and the other. But again, I wish I had the imagery here lined up in this particular presentation. I don't. But you can actually look at a human brain scan, MRI scan once again, and superimpose Baphomet over the top. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same, you know? Or you can say that, yeah, there's a horn-headed, hoofed, cross-legged deity going around scaring shit out of people and saying, don't do this or you're going to burn in hell. Do you know what I mean? It's what way do you want to go? Do you want to learn something, or do you want to just, do you want to stay away from that? I mean, personally, I think to a certain extent, that's sort of what the church is doing. I'm going to stay away from all of that. Don't look into it. Because if you do look into it, you'll find out it's about you. It's about the human experience. It's about our brains. It's us,
I think it also has some sort of implication on the universe and as a whole with duality as well as plurality. in that you have light and dark, you have day and night, you have devil and God, you have Baphomet, or you have the Jesus. And I think it's a repeat above so below, just over and over and over in this balance back and forth.
100%.
The number 6 is seen throughout, as we had described in our eye series, and then we'll see it again once we get into the brain, how the number 6 is found throughout again. And I think because it provides the most stable geometrical form for biological function, for spiritual function, for alchemical function. I mean, it's repeated for a reason, I think, for the purpose of the fact that it is stable and it supports so much. So yeah,
it almost supports all life on Earth with regards to 6 and 9. I mean, that's basically 1.618. You know, it's the Fibonacci spiral. It's
Lisa, didn't you say that the Amon's horn, though, the cellular structure was like made in triangles or something?
Yeah. So I wanted to touch. So Rick, you touch on so much, and I wanted to expand upon so much, but to what Nick was saying is that so there have been lots of studies on DMT. Okay, so let me backtrack. A lot of the DMT gurus, I've never heard them say anything of what I'm about to say. So you're going to hear it first on the Occult Rejects. And so, and I won't tell it all because we have a brain series coming up. So we have to, save some. But the neural cells that DMT works upon are called pyramidal cells or primordial cells, but they're spelled pyramidal cells, and they have a pyramid shape. Their cell body itself is a triangle, and then it extends with the dendrites going upward, and then the basal ganglia going downward. And it's mainly found in the cerebral cortex. And if you are familiar with the mammalian brain, only the mammalian brain has a cerebral cortex, and I believe only in humans it has 6 layers versus 5 or 4, what have you. Hence the whole 6 again. But it is on these pyramidal cells that the serotonergic receptors that you spoke about, the 5-HT2A, I believe, receptors, are on this pyramidal cells. And that is exactly what DMT works upon. And so,
hand in hand.
Right, absolutely. And you see a majority of these cells concentrated within, I believe, the 4th and 5th layer of the cortex. And that's usually the point where you see a lot of the communication going back and forth between the hemispheres. So that would be one. And then in studies, they look at the enzyme for the biosynthesis of DMT, because they think DMT is so volatile and hard to measure as it's being bioproduced. So they've kind of looked at precursors, enzymes, or any kind of like tryptophan or anything like that to see, are these in these areas that we believe that they are. And you see a lot of them in the retinal tissue, as well as all of the tissue that is responsible for cognition, such as the amygdala. I'm getting it wrong. The
amygdala.
Yes. For some reason, I'm like all of a sudden.
I have brain farts.
Yeah. I was like, how do I not remember this? But it's in the horns, like you had said. It's also in the amygdala, as well as a forebrain. And then anything having to do with cognition, you find a lot of these pyramidal cells in that area. And the reason that I read all this was because they were looking, and that's why I say a lot of the DMT gurus, they don't mention this. You have to go deep into the literature and look for this stuff.
Sure.
And the reason that they look at pyramidal cells and DMT's action on them is because pyramidal cells themselves have high neuronal plasticity in that they can change their function themselves, right? And so that's basically what you're going to need for memory and learning. Every time you have a neuron that has plasticity, it's involved in memory and learning. And then like you had mentioned, that it does promote neurogenesis. You see the regeneration of brand new neurons. So Oh, and the hippocampus. Yes, that was the other one. Cerebral cortex, hippocampus, amygdala. Yeah. And
that links perfectly, to be fair, with regards to Amun's horn once again, because Amun Ra, excuse me. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog, sorry. So Amun Ra, where we get obviously Amun's horn from, Amun Ra, he's synonymous. His sign is the pyramid. It's the pyramid.
Right.
Oh yeah,
So,
that was going to bring
again-
up. I was wondering if that's why Jay-Z goes like this up here.
Right.
Why not? Why not? It can't be just us guys that are seeing this. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. It's absolutely. And the more you look into it, the more, like I said, with regards to publishing Spirit in the Sky, I was like, yeah, mic drop, that one's done. I'm going to move on. But yeah, before I knew what I was doing, I produced. Where are we? This bad boy, Deities Missing Tryptamines, which I had another whole book waiting there for me, and again, once I'd done that, it was another kind of, right, we'll leave it at that, move on, maybe do something completely different. But yeah, through, I don't know, whether it's cosmic communication, coincidence, or just unbelievably good luck, stuff just keeps, I guess, dropping out of the ether, and then this bad boy was born, Searching for Osiris. And I had, again, I keep saying it was a mic drop. I'm going to walk away from this. But what I've found literally over the past 18 months from dropping this has blown my mind. I thought, again, for all intents and purposes, I was going to be staying in the ancient Egyptian, I guess, Graham Hancock kind of lost civilization arena, which this in the first place. But the more I find out about DMT and the possibilities therein with regards to the latest research, part 4 is part penned, and it's blowing my mind at the moment. There's stuff I won't talk about at the minute until obviously I've got this published and it's not out in the ether. But there's a lot more ancient art and new world art that appears to be, again, speaking from that same proverbial hymn sheet. Again, how many coincidences does it take until you have a confirmed correlation?
I think it's creepy, the amount of, this is my opinion, Renaissance art that is depicting your eyes and your brain. I think a lot of
it's ridiculous. No, it's absolutely ridiculous.
I will say your Amun Ra, Great Pyramid, Jesus, I believe that you had that on a tweet one time. And I'm surprised that a lot of people haven't made the connection that all three have one thing in common, which is light. Jesus, Great Pyramid, Amun Ra. It's all sunlight. Yeah. That's the one thing they have in common. And the one thing that perceives sunlight is retinal tissue as well as pineal tissue. And so we go back to this whole, seed of the soul, interpreting the electromagnetic spectrum and so forth. And in regard to the Bible, I always have read it more as a guidebook on quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And if you don't know quantum mechanics, it's very hard to understand what they're saying. And so when you start looking at electromagnetic spectrum, we start looking at quantum tunneling and string theory, and then you start reading the Bible, you're like, oh my God, it's telling you exactly what's happening. So yeah, I've always, it's allegorical. And I will say this, and in one of the debates that we talked about with the neuroscientists, the right side of the brain interprets allegory and the left side of the brain is ego. So when you talk about ego death, I'm wondering if they're saying shut off your left brain and turn on your right brain.
Yeah. Fish from the right side, not the left side of the boat, and that's where you're going to reap your rewards, Mm-hmm. Again, if you take that literal, you go fishing, I'm catching nothing on this side, but if I go over there, I'm going to whip all the mackerel out. What's going on there? Come on, really? Exactly. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever.
I think so.
And yeah, touching on the eyes, again, with regards to Renaissance art, it's the stuff that's out there. It's staggering. It absolutely beggars belief. I had to be extremely selective in deities, myth, and tryptamines, and so what was going to make the book and what wasn't. Otherwise it would have been pretty much a picture book. And to self-publish via Amazon, the more color pictures that are in there, the more expensive it is to produce. And I don't want to. When I originally built the Spirit in the Sky, such a large edition of a book that I had to, in order for me to float that on Amazon, people were going to be asked to pay in excess of £35 or $40 for a book, which is ridiculous. No one's going to do that, you know? I mean, especially with someone that someone might not have ever heard of. So I had to be extremely selective with what kind of made the grade and what won't make the grade, if you know what I mean. But some of the artworks are unbelievably obvious. She's going. Sorry, it's my girlfriend coming in getting her yoga bits. So I had a train of thought with that. I'll touch on this in a second, but just sticking with the eyes, I would like to talk about Osiris and his green skin and the photoreceptors and cone alignment within the human eye and pineal gland. Again, he's the only deity that has this odd looking or ill-fitting cone-shaped hat, green skin, a rainbow necklace, and kind of what's going on. Nobody knows what the crook and flail are about. The crook and flail explained a little better. If I get to there should be another image here somewhere. It's not going to be here, is it?
I think we even touched on that hat being the same thing in an Arable series, assuming that was.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, and even the same thing with like, isn't it crazy how much those look like Christmas lights as well?
Well, and again, it kind of goes full circle, you know. Christmas, the Christ, the chrism, the Christ oil in the spine, XYZ. I mean, you can shoot down so many different, white rabbit holes.
Oh, if you got a green iris, you can like paint a wreath out of that too. Yeah.
It's crazy. No, it's absolutely crazy. But what we find with regards and what have you, it's crazy. I mean, if we dissect the name of Osiris itself, which not a lot of big people, I mean, etymologies just drive me crazy. Before I get onto this, it's just the etymology of the hippocampus. Again, hippocampus means seahorse. Yeah, and the imagery would actually make a bit more sense if I show you back. Where are we? We've got so many images backed up here. We'll have to do this again another time because we'll be talking for hours otherwise. Last one. Okay. So the hippocampus proper is described as a white eminence, throughout Gray's Anatomy and science books across the globe. But we've also got a mythology about Pegasus, which I'm pretty sure everyone's familiar with, a winged horse. Horses certainly don't fly, so it has a greater, deeper meaning. And this is where I get to Bill Donohue's research again with regards to brain mechanics in the Bible and Greek mythology. Excuse me. The Greek myth describes Pegasus as a white horse born of a union between Medusa and Poseidon. So we find that Poseidon is not only the god of the sea, but he's also the god of horses, which would make sense that Pegasus himself would thus be a seahorse. So Pegasus was also favoured by the goddess of memory and the 9 muses. And muse itself, the etymology, means to think, dream, or recall. But Pegasus, he was known to have kicked open the fountain of knowledge, what was described as Hippocrene, and it was a part of his hoof that actually kicked the font of these waters open. But we actually find out that there's a part of the hippocampus, which is called the pes hippocampus, which on this next image, if the third image down there, we can actually see the proverbial horseshoe, which is Pegasus's horseshoe, which is part of the hippocampus, which is pretty incredible. But again, like I've said as well, horses can't fly. So what does that mean? Where does he get his wings from? And that's where we look at etymologies again with the likes of the cerebrum. The cerebrum on the top right-hand corner that you can see there is shaped like the wings of a cherubim, the wings of an angel. And it's the angel's wings within the Bible that are meant to touch the walls of the temple, just like those particular wings of the cerebrum are touching the walls of the skull or the temple of one's cranium, which is, I think it's quite amazing, you know? Excuse me. But the cerebrum is, as I said, the cerebrum is synonymous with cherubim and the wings of God. But the cerebrum itself surrounds and protects the brain or the house of God. It's all anecdotal and it's all allegorical. Should we, again, choose to look at it like that? Or, again, we can have Zeus, our moon, flying around the sky on a winged horse, throwing thunderbolts. I mean, what's going on there? It doesn't make a lot of sense if we're going to take that, again, at face value, you know? And, again, our moon is synonymous, like we've just spoke about, with the pyramid, but our moon is the ram-headed deity, and the work that's here is actually from Brad Clausen, the, I guess, illustrator to the stars, the guy that does the Pearl Jam covers and tour posters and bits and pieces. He's a very celebrated, I guess, esoteric kind of artist, and you look at some of his artwork that's been inspired by ancient. My God, it's all brain mechanics again. It's absolutely beautiful. And it was that guy that was actually looking at the brain structure alongside Amun Ra's, I guess, chiseled into stone. He's going to live forever like that, I'm sure. But you've either got a ram-headed deity, which makes no sense whatsoever again. I mean, how childish. Or we can read between the lines again. And yeah, it's quite clearly to do with the brainstem, the hippocampus, and brain mechanics, everything that's going on with regards to what it is to be human and what, I guess, makes us human. I think you might have lost me just there. But throughout history, with what we've got up on screen at the minute, we've got Inanna next to the brainstem, Armistice of Ephesus, Diana and the brainstem, Venus of Willendorf, Ishtar. It's all the same. It's all the same thought process, you know. It's all trying to describe. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, what am I trying to explain? For argument's sake, on the top right-hand side, you've got Diana and Armistice with their hands out like this, almost trying to make an offering, but they look a bit ill-fitting, if that makes any sense. But if you look at the image in the middle of that, you've got what's known as the triangle nerves that are an essential part of the makeup of the human biology, you know? And if we aren't deified ourselves, if the gods, I liken us to, we are the gods, you know? When people say these gods are made in an image of you, it's not on the outside. It's almost like a cross-section of what's going on inside. And again, the Bible says God is in you. Jesus is within you. And if we look, I think I've got the, I mean, this itself is crazy. You've got a baboon-headed deity. Like, really? What does that mean? You know? But if you look at a baboon and the underside of the human brain, call it pareidolia, I would say that's got a lot more legs than a pharaoh with a baboon's head walking around ancient Egypt, deifying things, you know?
There was something I came across, a listener of the show sent it to me, and it was like a cross-section of like the brain. And I think I even sent it to Lisa and Teresa. Like it really did look. And the reason I remembered it, even the image, is because I was like, oh, you know, I just like tweeted something like a week or two ago, joking about Tiger King, you know, or something like that. And I was like, yo, that whole cross section literally looks like the same design that's on that fucking tiger's face that he's posing there with. Like even at the top where it has these lines coming like this and going down, it was almost like exact with like the brain image that I was just looking at. And I was like, I'll
have to recall that tweet. I don't remember. I'll have to go through.
Yeah, it was just like really weird. Yeah, I might actually know. You know what? I'm gonna have to actually make a post. I was actually gonna try to make a post about it, but you know, another weird thing that you were saying before when you were showing the other or the images that you were showing before, I do think even in the Gnostic Mass, believe it or not, I do think that you will see eyeball stuff and brain shit, but I think a lot of it you will also see when the priest is up at the altar with the priestess. I think when they come together, I think they're actually showing you like even more of a full story of like things going on inside your eyes and your brain.
Yeah, I wouldn't counter that at all. I would agree 100%.
But like by like them having their bodies put a certain way, with like his head's between her legs and her standing a certain way. I mean, a lot of it even looks like she wears a belt, the priestess, and she has like her hands on her side. If you go to look at the optic nerve, I mean, you'll see the same thing. You'll see there's like this little thing that looks like a belt and the hands on the side. And I'm like, yo, that's her with the guy's legs between her. Like,
yeah. And really as I say, I mean, just when I'm touching on your tweet again the other day, when you tweeted the birth of Venus, I was like, damn, I've not seen that painting before, but that's all I'm seeing. I'm not seeing a goddess standing on a 5 foot wide conch shell or whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? Straight away, I could see it. I didn't even have to read the context of what it was in. When you know kind of, I say when you know, but when you start looking at some of these Renaissance artists with a view to brain mechanics, all of a sudden the most bizarre scenes, the most unfathomable, what on earth is going on there? They're in clouds, they're flying, they're swirling, that dude's upside. What? Makes no sense at all in the real world. Do you know what I mean?
Rick, I think it was done on purpose, Rick, because most of those Renaissance artists were closeted anatomists. They were digging up bodies and going through anatomy and going through it. And it was the only way, I think, that they could get their message out. And disguise it amongst their
without being burnt at the stake. Sure.
That right, and I think that's what. And back then, everybody was talking to each other. Everybody, a person that was well versed in art was also well versed in anatomy. Versus now, no one talks to each other, and you know what I mean. In that, I think there's a lot more separation versus back then. I think they were trying to tell you what was going on, and they could only do so via. And then also, you had to work for it. I think with our Michael Myers series, you have to work for this information. They're not just going to serve it up to you on a platter. You have to also have that whole alchemical change and seek out this information.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%. And again, the more, I guess the older the eye is, the more confusing it gets with, unless there was a proverbial lost Graham Hancock pre-Diluvian civilization, call it Atlantis, call it whatever you want. I'm not talking that they've got rockets and satellites and lasers and, do you know what I mean? Like what we've got today, you don't need that in order to understand a lot of brain mechanics alongside psychedelic experiences, And I think that the profundity of a lot of these highly illicit psychedelic experiences, I think, I would stand quite firm in saying that the reason I believe a lot of these, especially DMT, is highly illegal, is because they want you to have this so-called resurrection at church by citing verses and singing and all being, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's fine. They're not hurting anyone. That's great. But at the end of the day, other than songs of praise and a little bit of I love thy neighbor, what are you getting out of that? I think that the reason a lot of these are fundamentally out of reach is because if the masses were privy to, let's say, a breakthrough DMT experience, all of a sudden religion means nothing. The wars of the world almost, it's like I can see a bigger picture. I can see maybe where I've come from, maybe where I'm going when this meat suit is outlasted its sell-by date. Heaven, I guess, really probably is a place on earth. If there is an immaterial, call it reality, call it dimension, call it other, there's something in the ether, something that's made of, we are vibrating energy, we are light, but we're a very, very fine sliver of the entire bandwidth, like 0.whatever% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And I think that DMT, and ayahuasca, for argument's sake, give you the tools to almost pierce that veil, albeit fleetingly, momently, make of it what you will. But I think that there is something there the whole world could pretty much agree on, with a consensus to, I mean, to a certain extent, I guess I'm saying psychedelics are a religion within themselves, should you know how to use them in the right setting. I think it opens up a whole new ether of possibilities to you. Like I said, I thought I was going to be fading to black. That's it. It's all gone. Nothing left now. But if I die in my sleep tonight, I've had a great innings, but I don't think that's it. Do you know what I mean? Crikey. If I'm going back to where I think I've been on a breakthrough experience of DMT, Christ, that's a party that goes on forever, you know? Who knows? I mean, we're only at the threshold, really, via Rick Strassman's infamous DMT experiments of the 90s. We're literally tip of the iceberg with this, you know, and what the guys are doing in Greenwich in South London at the moment with the DMTX, extended state DMT. Some of the stories that they're coming back from there, it's just, it's beyond sci-fi, but apparently it's real. And it's not just an independent subjective experience. It seems to be the same place and the same entities that's reoccurring, you know? It's not like taking LSD and I don't know, but you can see Snoopy, whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's that's completely subjective to whoever's using it. But it's starting to appear at the minute with what's going on with this extended state DMT. This otherworldly, call it realm, call it dimension, it may well be littered with, call them immaterial others that know who you are and welcome you back. I mean, what can be more exciting, knowing that this is part one of a ride that might just go on forever, you know, as opposed to, again, I keep saying it, fade to black and that there, you know. I think the possibilities are absolutely amazing.
You know, one thing I did want to just mention before I forget, because I was trying to remind myself and listen to you at the same time. I do think, like, I agree with a lot of what you were saying, and I did want to just add, I do think on that slide that you had actually here, I'm going to go back to it if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
There was you know, like the Egyptian deity, I can't think of its name right now, where it has the horns that almost come out to the sides and swirl. Yeah, I think even that's inside the brain and even inside your optic nerve. I think that
without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know if you're going to be able to pick this up, because if I go into my laptop at the moment, it's probably going to break where we are in this. But I'm going to try and put an image up against the camera. So, I mean, I can send it to you, and you can pop it onto the screen if you want.
That's no big deal. I mean, you can put it up to the screen if you want. But yeah, for me to download and try to put it up.
Again, this particular comparative thesis, argument, call it what you want, was actually put forward again by Brad Clausen, the guy that discovered the Amun-Ra deity. Where are we? It's in here somewhere. I need to clear this phone up big time so it's a lot more accessible to what I need. Okay, here we are. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. So, all right. So we've got, where are we?
All right, yeah.
So everything that he's wearing on his headdress, literally, it's called the Artef crown, but it literally plays perfectly. It's an overlay colorsome. And it's, again, it's obvious when you know how to look at these particular art renderings. You know, again, we could be completely wrong, but if we are wrong, what does it mean? There were baboon-headed or ram-headed gods walking around the Delta Nile 5,000 years ago? Highly, highly, highly unlikely. You know, I know what's more likely. It's allegorical of who we are and what essentially makes us, you know. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
I like this. I like this feather of Matt you got going on over here. That's really impressive.
And that's crazy in itself as well. The feather of Mart and a photoreceptor cone structure, you know. The middle imagery that we've got at the bottom there is in the second book, the means, and that's known as the Hall of Judgment, whereby they weigh the recently deceased heart with a feather, and whoever's if it's light enough, you can enter the kingdom of Osiris, you know. But I don't think we're talking about weight. I don't think it's anything to do with weight. I think I think them scales again are allegorical. It's talking about light, whatever's light.
I was going to ask, do you think it's a play on the word light, actual, like, not going by weight, but actual light? Would you say
light? Yeah, because everything is allegorical of light, you know.
Even the rams, like with goats and stuff like that, they're seasonal breeders, and so when photoperiod starts to wane, that's when you start to see females coming into estrus, getting ready to mate, and then the kids are dropped, you know, around springtime. So I think most of the horns or whatever are indicating photoperiod.
Sure.
They're indicating light and darkness, and then the rods themselves, they distinguish between darkness and light,
sure,
versus the cones that distinguish between color. And then the green itself, and we covered all this in our eye series, the green itself, it's one, the red is the most abundant of the cones, but green follows a second of it. But I believe, and I think Teresa brought this up, and I didn't know this, but that a majority of the electromagnetic spectrum that is emitted by the sun itself is green. Like it has the most green of the colors or something like that. I don't remember how you said it, Teresa, but it was something to that.
I don't remember.
Yeah. But and so it when you see a deity like this with the cone, with the rod, you're thinking day and night. You see the green, you're thinking the sun. You're seeing the ram, you're thinking seasonality. It just all comes back to the eye, the brain, everything. For us, for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there's another image here as well, and I think I just skipped over it. But it's where the myth of Horus, who's Osiris's son, is in a daily and nightly, I guess, battle with his nemesis Set, who killed his father. And again, we can look at that as good fighting evil over. Crikey. Let me find the imagery. It'll be a bit easier to explain once it's on screen. Okay. So on the right, you've got a statue of Ramesses, okay, who's basically assimilated as Osiris. And if my hypothesis turns out to be erring on, legitimate or correct, and we're saying that Osiris, is something to do with the pineal gland, or indeed the photoreceptors within the pineal gland, something else might actually be playing out with this particular statue, because as I've written here, I'll literally read it as it is. Legend has it that Horus's victorious battle with Set, as the sun rises, would see Set banished to the underworld until the sun set once again. Set, however, would defeat and overthrow Horus there and rule over the pervading darkness until the sun rises. Now that's the Egyptian mythology. What I'm saying is that if we're correct postulating that Osiris might be part of the pineal, would it not make more sense to envisage Horus as a metaphor for the neurotransmitter serotonin, which is secreted by the pineal gland during daylight hours only, whereby Set would then become a natural contender for the neurotransmitter's chemical counterpart, which is typically distributed by central parts of the body, around central parts of the body by way of the pineal during hours of darkness or once the sun has set. Again, I think that's allegorical by nature, as opposed to, again, two deified hawk and jackal-headed deities welcoming the now assimilated pharaoh to the throne and being recognized as Osiris. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever in my mind's eye, unless, again, we look at it as metaphors for essential chemical, chemicals that are secreted via the pineal gland during certain times of the day and night. I mean, what is the pineal gland's job? It's the light receptor of the body, right?
Exactly. In that, when you see the sun set itself, the electromagnetic spectrum that is on the horizon actually primes the pineal for shutting off.
That's
I
correct,
guess you would say serotonin. I believe, I don't know, it's so much that it releases serotonin, but it doesn't manufacture serotonin. I think that's kind of still up for debate. I think the bread and butter of the pineal is melatonin. And so in order to kick off melatonin, you have to see that spectrum on the horizon as the sun is setting in order to turn it on, in order for melatonin to be secreted at night. And then the secretion of melatonin itself kicks on growth hormone stimulating factor to the hypothalamus as well as the pituitary to release growth hormone into the rest of the body, so that you can have growth hormone bathing your body at night while you're supposed to be resting. So the setting is the priming of the pineal. Yes. Yeah,
100%. Or again, we can, I guess, throw common sense aside and say that you've got a god of good and evil with anthropomorphic features battling it out day and night. It's just, doesn't make, in my mind anyway, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would try again to read between the lines and make a bit more sense of what's going on. And that's what I believe in this particular situation is going on. You know, I think it's interesting you touched on like the lambs coming in as lambs and different times of the year. I don't know if a lot of this stuff is multi-layered as well with regards to meaning with myth and metaphor. But if you might be familiar, I've not got it on my laptop at the moment, but there's another deity known as Hathor. And when you look at Hathor, a bust of Hathor alongside the uterus, it's almost inseparable, you know. It's like, oh, what's going on here? But if you look at Hathor's ears, we can actually see they've got ovaries. Okay. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But the Egyptologists are like, it's aesthetic design. It's what, really? Come on. Who are you trying to kid? Who are you guys trying to kid? But again, you can run with it or run away from it. You know, it's absolutely crazy.
I think maybe we'll wrap it up here, and we could. I would definitely like to do a part 2 with you at some point. So. Yeah,
most definitely.
Thank you very much again. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find your stuff? Let them know where you can find your books.
Yeah, Amazon once again. I know some people are Amazon this, Amazon that. They take, it's like Facebook and la-di-da-di-da, but at the end of the day, publishers don't really want to touch a lot of this stuff for fear of getting burnt with regards to religion and psychedelic compounds and bits and pieces. So that's the route I've chose. That's the route I'm happy with. You can find us, on Amazon. I've got my own, YouTube channel as well. Just type my name into YouTube and come and comment on the stuff that we're all talking. And I don't know, maybe find yourself a citation in the next book, because that's how it happens. It's not all my hard work. It's everyone else. It's like the community, you know. It's awesome. The hive mind, as it were.
I love it. I think I do even have your YouTube in the bottom too. If I don't, I'll add it. But I'm pretty sure I grabbed a bunch of your links and threw them in the notes already.
You're a legend.
Thank you again, man. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your books. And I love that you brought slides. That's what's up. That was great. Teresa, let everybody know where they could find your stuff again.
Sure. Sorry, I was like super quiet this episode because I was just listening to everything that Rick was saying, and it was really interesting. So I was just like taking it in. But yes, please come check out the Spiritual Gangsters podcast with Clown World Weekly, especially. Also, you can find me mostly on Instagram. I hardly ever check Twitter. And check out my Etsy shop, please. Thank you.
Yes. She's got some great hats over there.
Woo.
And Lisa, thank you as usual for coming on. I always appreciate your input, especially with the science aspect. That's why I love having you on. That will be the
Education for me as well. So do you know what I mean? And again, with you guys, I'm not sure if we follow each other via Twitter. It's hard to keep up, but if we don't, hit us up and I'll follow you back. If we already do, just remind me and I'll be like, dang, there you go. So no, it's the more people that are doing this and talking about this sort of stuff, the easier it's going to be for everyone, you know?
Definitely. I totally agree. Yeah, and we'll definitely have to do a part 2. I know you got some stuff coming up in the future. Maybe we can do it after that when things are better. But I definitely would like to get to a part 2, definitely. And thank you, everybody who joined in on the live and jumped in on the chat. There was tons of great stuff in the chat, as usual. For people listening, I highly suggest to watch it so you can actually see the visuals. And check out, like, I normally say, check out the live chat. There's always great information. And, I try to throw up a lot of the comments up onto the screen just for people who are watching it after the fact and you don't have the live chat anymore. So, yeah, thank you all for jumping on to check out this episode. I had a great time as usual. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.